And it is a pleasure now to be joined by one of the great voices in our business. Just a true professional guy whose work I've admired for a long, long time as a radio nerd myself. That is Scott Graham of Westwood One. Scott, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Thank you for having me. And, it's Friday here, so this place is hopping a lot more than it was just a couple of days ago. You could have walked through here on Tuesday night and, some tumbleweed rolling by. Now it's really going.
Yeah, these last 2 days, it was funny earlier because it was a little quieter this morning, and some of our colleagues over here, our fellow DC guys, were talking, and we're like, man, it's a little quiet. And then Gronk walks in. I'm like, I think the chaos is about to peak again. Don't worry, have no fear. Gronk is here.
Chaos does follow Gronk.
Yes, follow, lead, surround all sides. But this is Super Bowl 15 for you, and you will hear Scott's coverage, of course, this weekend on the Team 980 as we have full coverage of Super Bowl 58, including Super Bowl Sunday, all of the pre- and post-game festivities. What's your favorite part of that pregame, that lead-up? Because you guys do so much in the hours and hours and hours leading up to kickoff.
Well, what we do over the course of the week, and we start on Sunday, is we basically craft what that 4.5 hours before kickoff is going to be, starting at 2 o'clock Eastern. And we get a lot of the interview stuff done with players, done on Monday night. We have our own area as a rights holder away from the crowd on opening night. We get a lot done that night. This year, we got just about all of it done that night because that's the way the teams wanted it. Oftentimes in past years, we would go talk to the head coach on Thursday or Friday out at their facility, or the quarterback, would be set apart from that. This year, we got all of that done fairly early, and it's been really more about putting together the remainder of what we have, talking to the people that are going to be filling in around the rest of that, and then it's like a big jigsaw puzzle, right? It's okay, what goes here, what flows into this best, and you do it for an individual hour-long show, which could be a standalone based upon which radio station is carrying it, but you also are flowing for the full 4.5 hours, and by the time we get to 4 o'clock, it's must carry for everybody anyway, so we know what that's going to end up looking like. It's a very, very involved operation, but being part of that operation and trying to figure it out. Right before I came to you, we were trying to slot something else here, move something else there, because ultimately we're going to have everything in place pretty much by the end of the day today.
So take me inside that area Monday night where it's you and who else is conducting these interviews, because you guys have obviously Harlan and the game broadcasters. You have so many different former and I'm assuming current players on set working with you, special to Super Bowl Sunday. So who's in the room and how do those interviews go?
We have 2 interview rooms so that as the Chiefs or the 49ers staff bring their players down, and we've made our requests for who those players are going to be.
Sure.
Before we ever get to the city. So we'll have the 2 rooms, and Laura Oakman, Mike Golick, and I all have interviewing responsibilities. We know who we're slated to interview.
Right.
We also know if 2 people show up at the same time that are both mine, and I'm talking to one of them, that Laura might have to be ready to speak to that person. But this year I don't think we had any of those. And we'll get our 6 to 8 minutes, which with each of the ones that comes down, have our conversation, move on. I get out of the room. Golick jumps into the room because his interview has just come in. And we do that for the first team. In this case, this year it was the Chiefs. And then we do it for the second team with the 49ers. It can be a very efficient way of doing it. It could also be a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
This year was pretty efficient. I mean, it moved through exactly pretty much the way we thought it would.
That's nice, and I'm sure it helps that the Chiefs have done this a time or two before. The 49ers back for the second time in 4 years.
Both PR staffs this year, and in general, if you're not a newbie to this, a new team to this, they have a pretty good idea how this all runs.
Yeah.
It's the new teams that get here, they're like, wait a minute, what do I have to do now? And
right.
It gets, but again, we've had some experience with this too, so when you talk about Howard Deneroff, who's been the executive producer of Westwood One for so long, he can kind of help them make it easy for them and doable for us.
Right. Scott Graham, as if I need to give that voice any introduction, any reminder, Westwood One Sports is with us here on the Hoffman Show. What's the most interesting thing that came out of an interview in your mind? It could be something significant to the game or just something that you learned about a player or a coach that you're like, wow, that really sticks with me.
I think that there's a number of things. I think that, everybody's been waiting to see what they're going to hear from Travis Kelce, and you will hear from Travis Kelce. And was there going to be any talk about Taylor? Yes, there is. But there are players that you don't think about with regard to, this is a prominently featured player, Trent McDuffie, who is a second-year player out of Washington and an all-pro in just his second year, playing kind of a hybrid slot corner position. He is one of the most interesting, intelligent, impressive 23-year-olds I've ever spoken to. And I spoke with him a couple of weeks ago, 4 weeks ago maybe, during the season for one of our pregame shows. I got the opportunity to talk to him again. It's just so intriguing to hear the thought process that goes in for somebody who's really trying to be a student of the game. But, Christian McCaffery and the fact that, he decided he was going to train with a professional surfer because he was going to learn a different way to try to make himself that much better, just that much better each time. And what did that teach him? It taught him about the fact that, he could improve on his breathing. I mean, it's amazing when you hear individual players and coaches go through their process. Some great stuff there, but great stuff during the course of the week this week. Joe Montana is going to be joining us, and
decent get in a 49er Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, and he also played for the Chiefs and brought him to a championship game later in his career.
Yeah.
Wayne Newton's going to be joining us. Mr. Las Vegas. If you're going to do a Super Bowl from Las Vegas, why not sit down with the man from Donkashane, who, by the way, has a couple of tremendous stories to tell. So we try to vary it. We try to keep it fresh and moving along over the course of time, and hopefully we've gotten to that point, and then by the time we get to 6:39, we'll have a football game.
Yeah, for sure. Scott Graham is with us here on the Hoffman Show. Super Sunday coming up this Sunday. The whole 4.5 hours we are carrying on the Team 980, and we want to ask you about the game itself in a second before our time is done here. But that idea that everyone is leading towards 6:39, and that's when the thing begins. Except for you, that's kind of when you get to finally take a breath. What is that energy like for you as you're doing Super Bowl 15? For you, knowing that, I finally get to breathe when the game kicks off, as opposed to everyone starts holding their breath.
I do get to breathe, but my job is far from done, because when I do the post-game show and we get to the radio replay part, I've got to be pretty detailed about what happened leading up to the highlights we're playing. So while I'm sitting there watching the game, and this year I will be sitting next to Devin McCourty, who will be co-hosting with me pregame, halftime, and postgame, 3-time Super Bowl champion, I'll be taking notes on each drive so that when we ultimately get to the end of the game and say, these are the 8 highlights that we're using, I have the ability to walk my way through what it was. This holding call set this up. So I have to keep an eye on the game in that way, but no, I'm not talking anymore at that point for a while until we get to halftime. And then, post-game is an entirely different animal. Post-game is the game is over. Kevin Harlan talks about who just won. The confetti comes down, and all hell breaks loose on the field. And Laura Oakman and Mike Golick are running in between players doing interviews. They're kicking upstairs to Kevin, and then ultimately I take over that part of it, and it's downstairs to Laura, over to Mike, back up to me. We're taking a commercial. Wait, we can't take a commercial. Laura's got this person. It's crazy, and we try to get as many of the winning players on as is possible, and that's quite an undertaking. And I'll tell you what, Laura has been doing this for a while.
She's so good.
This is her 6th Super Bowl for us, and I believe it's Mike Golick's 3rd Super Bowl for us. And Mike will tell you the story. He's a player. I mean, he was down in the trenches, defensive lineman in the National Football League. He was in no way prepared for what that was going to be like, the scrum after the Super Bowl, the first one that he did. Now he's gotten a little bit, more used to the idea, but He tells it funnier than I do.
He's a funny guy, that Mike Golick. By the way, Mike Golick Jr. will be joining us to close out the week later on in the show. And I will say this again, I feel like I'm blowing smoke here, Scott, but like I've listened as a radio person to you do this for a long time, and specifically on Super Bowl Sunday, because like so many millions of Americans, I'm driving to and from my Super Bowl party, and so I have distinctive memories of listening to that
Thank
chaos.
goodness people are in cars, because otherwise I can't figure out who would be listening to us on Super Bowl Sunday,
well,
right?
That's what it is, right? It's like you finish watching your Super Bowl finish watching the Super Bowl at your Super Bowl party, you get in the car, hopefully if you're listening to us right now, you'll flip on the Team 980, and you'll hear the chaos that Scott just described, and I have distinct memories of certain Super Bowls and driving home. One that's popping into mind right now is like driving home from my aunt and uncle's house to my grandparents' house on Long Island in New York, and like listening to that exact chaos that you're talking about. And Westwood One has been doing it well forever. As for the game itself, in our final few minutes here with Scott Graham, who again is the host for the pre and post game halftime as well on Westwood One this weekend, have you found yourself leaning towards any particular side for any given reason as the week has gone on and you have studied this game more and more?
When I look at the rosters globally, it's hard for me not to say that San Francisco is a team that has got a lot going for it, and when they have it going on all counts, they are a very difficult team to beat. The one, I generally will look at one group, offense, defense, from two teams. So there's 4 different groups. I'll look at one group in each Super Bowl, and I'm going to say to myself, this is the one that potentially could change the game. The Chiefs' defense could change this game.
Yep.
They have played that well. Steve Spagnuolo had, and he proved it last week in Baltimore, or 2 weeks ago in Baltimore in the championship game. I mean, I thought for sure the Ravens playing at home would be able to get their offense going, and they were unable to do it. And that was Steve Spagnuolo. I talked with him last week, and he's very excited about this group that he's got. I would imagine Brock Purdy is going to see a couple of things early in this game that he has not seen before. I can tell you he's going to, because Steve Spagnuolo is probably going to throw some things out there that he hasn't thrown out there before. That could change and tip the scales in the Chiefs' favor in this game. Kansas City hasn't figured out a way to score in the second half in a while. They've put up points when they've needed to in the postseason right now. I would say that my gut would say that if the Chiefs' defense can't do that, this is San Francisco's game. But if the Chiefs' defense can do that, coin toss, and if you leave it up to Patrick Mahomes to win the game, he's going to win the game.
He's very good at that whole winning thing.
Yep.
Last thing for you. Have you talked to Kyle at all this week? Did you guys get a chance to chat with him?
Shanahan?
Yes.
I did not do the interview with Kyle Shanahan. Laura Oakman did.
I am curious if you talked to Laura about it. If not, I might have to go try to find Laura, who's been on the show before.
Yeah, she's not far away.
She's wandering around somewhere. There's obvious curiosity in Washington about Kyle, as his long history there. I personally am fascinated by the way he has been able to build that in San Francisco, and there's extra intrigue now with Adam Peters coming in Washington. But specifically for Kyle and his legacy, like, does he feel any pressure from what you've been able to gather of his Super Bowl history? Like, can he finally win one? Like, is there any of that you think has infiltrated the intense focus that is Kyle working on a game plan leading up to Super Bowl week?
It's got to be there. I mean, there's when you are as focused on what he does, it's got to be there. I don't know how much it invades his thought process. I don't know how much it invades what it is that he does, which is so rigid and so disciplined in terms of trying to get to where he wants to get to on a day, on a week, in a game. But it's got to be there. And it's funny because here he goes against Andy Reid right now, and a few years ago, Andy Reid, when they beat the 49ers, was in that exact position.
Totally. Yeah, no, it is something that we tend to forget, how quickly they can change. One game for it all on Sunday, 4.5 hours of pregame leading up to it, led by this man, Scott Graham, Westwood One. Thank you so much for your time, sir. And I guess you get to go finish putting together that pregame show now.
Yeah, we're going to be at it for a little while tonight, but we'll get there.
Best of luck. Damon Amendolara joins us here on set next.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.